Cynically, I'd probably say no, because people are very selfish. And if you look at the disproportionate of wealth, I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, for a country like Pakistan, 6% of the population own over 90% of the land. So you've got this incredible concentration of power, wealth, and influence in a tiny, tiny segment of society. What's going to make that society give up that wealth and that power? Very few people are capable of doing that. And yet, the long-term goal, yes, obviously you need a stable society. If you look at a country like Pakistan, which is a country I'm deeply fond of, I have huge affection, has got huge potential, but until you look at reform, until you look at land reform, redistribution of wealth, you'll never ever get a stable and flourishing society. Now, if I take the example of Pakistan, and then apply that to the globe. If you look at a wealth map, if you like, of globally, then you'll see the concentrations of wealth, obviously in America, increasingly in China. India, interestingly, you know, hits a huge number of millionaires, crore patties. You're doing very well on that front. But there's a massive gap between that very rich elite, and it's a challenge that, as you know, the world has struggled with, is how do you actually measure out resources equitably and favourably? If everybody was a vegetarian, for example, there would be enough food to go around the world. So people tell me, and I'm not a vegetarian. You know, would I be willing to give up meat if I thought I could feed the world? I don't know. Possibly I'd like to say yes, but I'm sure I'd go off and have a sliced steak. So the problem is it's human nature, and human nature is intrinsically selfish, it's self-protective, and it looks at immediately self, then it looks at family, then it looks at its community, then it looks at its faith and religious stuff. And because everybody's operating in those boundaries and seeing everybody as the other, not as themselves, as humanity, there's very, very few inspirational individuals ever in the history of mankind, like, you know, the Gandhis, the Jesus Christ, etc., that can step outside that definition of themselves as an Indian, a male, or a Christian, or a Hindu, and actually embrace humanity in a scale that would really make a difference. And I think, you know, unless you start getting more of people like that in the world, less selfish, and I think that will be driven by issues like climate change, because climate change actually is cross-border. It doesn't confine itself to a country. You can't say that what I do here in India, if I do mass pollution and burn another 500 tons of coal, yes, it's going to affect Bangladesh. Even it's flooding, it's going to affect Nepal, it's going to affect the glaciers. I mean, if you look at the way the water systems are linked in South Asia, they're incredibly intrinsically dependent upon each other. So selfish action by one state, trying to hoard water or block it upstream, is actually going to affect another state. But in fact, an issue like climate change, as we see more dramatic monsoons or uneven monsoons, desertification, you know, huge cyclones. Earthquakes are not affected by climate change, that's a different factor. But as we see these humanitarian disasters happening on a scale, you realise that you cannot operate in isolation. You know, you can no longer be an individual or country and behave in a selfish and irresponsible manner, because actually it affects everybody in the world. What happens on one side of the world is going to have a big impact on the other. And I think that's where the change, where the knowledge, people start to accept and understand that their behaviour is going to affect others and ultimately themselves, then that's where change will take place, because you can no longer be selfish in a joined up world.